guys, welcome back to the 10th episode of my Fixing American Democracy series. We are willing to fight to reimagine and reform our democratic elections for generations, and I mean generations to come, that will truly create a government that truly by, of, and for the people. And in this 10th episode, I will be arguing why Election Day should be a national holiday. And this is ultimately an important topic simply because it is our constitutional duty as American citizens to elect America's leaders, and that will ultimately determine the course of our nation's future. And I think this is an important building block of reforming our democratic elections, or in other words, fixing American democracy. Simply because if we make Election Day a national holiday, it will ultimately increase more record-breaking high turnout than ever before. And I think, honestly, in my opinion, making Election Day a national holiday would solve so much of the low turnout in our democratic elections. And if I can find it over here, and as you may remember, elections have always been on the Tuesday before the election, and this has actually particularly affected many Americans, because some people say it's quite inconvenient for many Americans, particularly those who can't take time off work to cast their ballots. And this problem actually disproportionately affected many Blacks and Latino and lower income voters. And this is one of the reasons why I do support making Election Day a national holiday, where on that day, all retail stores, all businesses, and even all mega corporations and federal and government jobs, like the federal, state, and local government jobs, they have to be all required to actually be closed on that specific day for their employees to go out there and vote for leaders, and a political party that will best represent their values in government, that will ultimately create a better government for the people, for, of, and by the people. And I think making Election Day a national holiday will carry on the successes of the 2020 general election, Brock. In the 2020 election, we saw record-breaking turnout, and despite us going through a hardship of the pandemic during that time, we still saw the largest increase in many Americans voting. Around 67% of all citizens aged 18 and older reported voting, up 5 percentage points from 2016. In addition, 73% of all voting age citizens were registered to vote, 2% points higher than in 2016. This is astonishable. This is fascinating. This is very, very, very interesting, and I'm actually proud. I'm very happy that many Americans, even myself, voted in the 2020 election. We saw this massive record-breaking turnout than any other election in history. That's ultimately a good thing. And honestly, what best way to carry on this tradition is that by making Election Day a national holiday, simply because let's carry on the tradition of what the 2020 general election brought, and that was record-breaking high turnout. Let's keep increasing voter turnout to the point where all Americans, and I mean all Americans, can participate and elect leaders that best represent our values, that will best represent us, and will create a far more productive and effective government for all Americans. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I support making Election Day a national holiday. And also, another big reason is that we are celebrating American democracy. This is something that we should all celebrate. We should all celebrate this, because other countries in the world, like if it's Cuba and even China, their people don't even elect their leaders. But we do. We Americans elect our leaders. And that's something we should all be proud about. We should all be engaging in, because we can truly help shape the future and the future course of what path our country is going to go down. We can do that by electing leaders and parties that best represent our values, and that are best more fit to actually hold that public office that they wish to be elected for. And that's one of the biggest reasons. And I think realistically, that's one of the second major strengths why we should actually make Election Day a national holiday, because it will get us to actually, take a break from our day-to-day lives, take a break from our work, take a break from our jobs, take a break from school, and actually all be with family and friends on this wonderful and terrific day where we are celebrating American democracy by voting and electing for leaders that we want to vote for, that we want to see in public office, to actually help shape a new beginning and a new path forward for our country. Because throughout the course of American history, we have experienced so much of our what our wonderful democracy has brought us. During the very first formation of the United States of America, only rich white landowners were able to actually vote during that time. And but we eventually evolved. We actually amended the Constitution. We actually expanded that because it was because of American democracy. It was because of the state governments that were able to actually give women the right to vote. Because, for instance, in the state of Wyoming was the first state in the union to actually give women the right to vote, and more states soon followed that ultimately gave women the right to vote nationally. And this is back to making Election Day a national holiday. We're celebrating what American democracy has brought to our country when we are voting for new leaders. We're voting for new people to actually be a newer voice in our government that will have brand new ideas that can create that will always strive for a far more perfect union that as our founding fathers and what we all envisioned to live. And that's the biggest reason. It's going to give us a sense of that. It will also lead to, it will keep up the record-breaking turnout that we saw in the 2020 election, to the point where we can see 100% or 90% voter turnout, like how the people in Australia have. Like in Australia, even though voting may be mandatory, we see record-breaking. We see voter turnout reaching at 96 or 96% vote turnout. Let's be at that level. Let's show to the rest of the world that America is the leader in democracy. We are the leader in democratic elections. That we the people will elect America's leaders and determine the course of our future. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I believe in making Election Day a national holiday. As well, other countries also do make Election Day have their elections a national holiday. For instance, South Korea has it. It takes place on Wednesday, not like ours, because our elections actually take place on the Tuesday. That take place on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November, because that's in the U.S. Constitution. And how South Korea does it, they call it the Legislative Election Day, where it's a national holiday for elections, where the people can have time off from their work and actually vote for their leaders to elect leaders that will best represent their values in South Korea's government. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I support making Election Day a national holiday. As well, this came close to actually becoming a reality, because back in the year of 2019 through 2020, let me see if I can find her. Democratic representative from California's 18th congressional district proposed the bill HR 294 of the Election Day Holiday Act of 2019. This bill would actually require a federal election day to be treated as a holiday for federal employees. And this is honestly something I do agree with. Even though I might not always side with Democrats on a lot of issues, I do support making Election Day a national holiday, simply because it will lead to record-breaking high turnout in the 2020 election. And it will give us, as Americans, a sense of pride to celebrate American democracy and what it actually brought to our country, like giving women the right to vote, giving blacks the right to vote, giving all people liberty, giving all people the freedom to elect their leaders and parties that best represent their values, as a people. And that's ultimately a good thing. And that's why I strongly support making Election Day a national holiday. And if we want to show that we are the leader in democracy, Let's make Election Day a national holiday. Let's join the rest of the free world and actually make Election Day a national holiday, and to actually and actually show that America is the leader of democracy. We are the leader of free and fair democratic elections, and we will always strive for a more perfect union by establishing a free and fair democratic process that we the people will elect America's leaders and determine the course of our country. And so let's actually talk about let's add to that, and throughout all my other videos where I talk about the pros and cons of other, like pros and cons of this and that, like for instance, like talking about the pros and cons of both government should taxpayers pay for should healthcare, is healthcare considered a right, listing the pros and cons of healthcare being a right or a con, or like, well, what are the negatives, like what is the argument against make it that healthcare should not be a right. There's always pros and cons to each policy, so that, and I want to carry on the tradition to actually show us that there is both sides to this argument of making Election Day a national holiday, even though I'm actually completely for making Election Day a national holiday. And let's actually talk about this overall summary. Election Day in the United States has occurred on the Tuesday following the first Monday in November, ever since President John Tyler signed an 1845 law establishing a specific voting day for the entire country. The decision was made taking into account farmers, a large portion of the voting constituency at the time who would not have been able to travel to polling places in winter months or during planting or harvest times. Sundays were for rest and worship, and on Wednesday, farmers typically sold their crops at the market, making Tuesday the best day of the week. Over time, voting rights expanded from only white male landowners aged 21 and older to include women and people of color, as well as citizens aged 18 and up, resulting in a dramatic increase in the voting eligible population and a shift in voter demographics. In 1800, 83% of the American labor force was agrarian. I could be pronouncing that wrong. But today, only 11% of total U.S. employment is agriculture related. The United States currently has 10 national holidays, including Memorial Day, Independence Day, and Christmas Day. Election Day could be made a holiday if a bill were passed by the House and Senate, then signed into law by the President. Approximately 2 million people who work for the federal government would be given a paid day off, and private companies might follow suit. A handful of states have made Election Day a state holiday, including New York, Hawaii, Kentucky, and in April 2020, Virginia. And would making Election Day a federal holiday increase voter turnout and celebrate democracy, or is it an optimistic idea that would exclude already disadvantaged voters while failing to increase vote out? Yes, it should be made a national holiday. That's what I've been arguing from this when this video began. Now let's actually talk about the pros and cons of making Election Day a national holiday. So the first pro that why people argue why we should make Election Day a national holiday, and this is what I've been saying all along, making Election Day a national holiday will increase voter turnout by enabling more people to vote. The U.S. ranks 26 out of the 32 for voter turnout among Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD countries. In the 2016 presidential election, 55.7% of the American voting age population cast the ballot. By comparison, Belgium reported the highest OECD voter turnout, 87.2% in the most recent national election. Sweden came second with 82.6%. Among registered voters in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, being too busy or having a conflicting schedule was the third highest reason cited for not voting, according for 14% of registered voters who did not cast a vote, about 2.7 million people. Former editor-in-chief of the Northwestern University Law Review, B.C. Tremeter, I could be pronouncing wrong, I might not know how to pronounce that, JD, stated, The demands of school and work schedules keep millions of Americans, especially those with children or long commutes, from ever getting to their polling station. The ideal solution is simple. Congress should make Election Day a national holiday or move Election Day to the weekend. A holiday would allow more citizens volunteer at polling places or drive the elderly to vote, and make a difference in states where long lines at the polls keep voters waiting for hours. And this is honestly true. This is one of the biggest reasons why I think Election Day should be a national holiday, because it will increase voter turnout. And it will enable more and more and more Americans to actually vote and actually recognize and actually take a break from their day-to-day lives, from school and from work to make money, to put food on the table, or even going to school to actually pursue a career of their choosing that they want to actually live, where they will be excellent contributors. Just take a break from that for just one day and actually vote and elect a leader that best represents your values, or vote on propositions to actually that will ultimately shape the laws that will ultimately shape laws that are put in place by you directly, that will actually make everybody's lives better in your state or in your territory. But the argument against this is that making Election Day, and this is the first con, making Election Day a national holiday will disadvantage low-income and blue-collar workers. Federal law doesn't require private employers to give employees paid federal holiday. A part-time hourly worker is more likely to have multiple jobs, none of which are likely to offer time for a national holiday. Andy McDonald, editor of the Berkeley Public Policy Journal, noted that the workers who are at least likely to get paid holidays are those who already have less of a voice in the political process. Americans working in retail, hospitality, and service jobs, for example, would most likely not receive the benefit of a paid holiday to vote. In fact, these voters may be more likely to have to work as a result of the federal election holiday, where they have had time off previously on a random Tuesday in November. Additionally, many of these individuals rely on school days as childcare for their children. And an additional day off school would prove to be problematic for individuals who may not have other readily accessible forms of childcare. People who have already suffered significant disenfranchisement, such as women and people of color, are more likely to be working those low-income jobs that want to get the time off to vote, even on a national holiday. Holidays would usually mean more work hours for retail workers because stores run promotions and sales, and as well going to the second pro, and this is what I've also been arguing, is that making Election Day a national holiday would turn voting into a celebration of democracy. Election Day is a holiday in Puerto Rico. Caravanas are joyful, noisy parades of cars festooned with flags and other decorations that stream through Puerto Rico streets ahead of an election and are credited with the island's over 80% voter turnout. In Australia, where voting is mandatory, elections are celebrated with parties and barbecues nationwide, resulting in turnout rates around 90%. The idea that voting should be a celebration, not a chore, is one argument for turning Election Day into a national holiday, according to Arkin Fung, PhD, and Jane Mansbridge, PhD, professor at the Harvard Kennedy School. They stated Citizen Day would do more than give our democracy the honor that it deserves. It would help our democracy work better. More people would vote if they had more time to cast their ballots. Furthermore, celebrating our democracy publicly would send the message that we value each other's citizenship as much as we value honoring past presidents. Donald Green, PhD Burgess Professor of Political Science at Columbia University, found that nonpartisan community parties celebrating Election Day in 2005, 2006, and 2016 increased voter participation between 2.6 percentage points and about 4 percentage points. And this is ultimately why I actually support this. I think, and this is what I've been arguing all along, is that we get this actually, on this day, we take a break from our day-to-day lives, from our work, from our schools, and so on, and actually celebrate with, and we can actually be with our communities, with our neighbors, with our family, and with our friends as we celebrate our democracy on this one day where we turn out to vote on propositions, on candidates that will represent us in our districts, or represent us in the United States Senate, or represent us in the House of Representatives, or actually vote for leaders to actually be our governors, our lieutenant governors, our mayors, and even our president of the United States, who will be our president of the United States, or if we should re-elect this guy to a public office. It will give us a sense of celebrating our democracy and giving us that sense of pride, to be proud to be Americans, that we are proud to be citizens, where we are always striving to be a more perfect union, where we're always, and I mean always, actually where we're all coming together, collaborating, and actually voting for leaders that best, and parties that best represent our values, to keep keep establishing a government that's truly by, of, and for the people. And then the second major con, why some people argue why we should not make Election Day a national holiday, is that changing state laws and individual company policies would be more effective ways to help people vote. And this is completely true. And I have a part-time job currently. I currently work at Walmart right now, and even though it's a minimum wage job, they do offer some time off to actually allow their employees to vote, and they're completely right about that. Company policies and even state laws can actually be more effective ways to actually help people vote. And according to the AFL-CIO, 30 states require employers to allow employees time off for voting. Arizona, for example, allows employees who do not have 3 consecutive hours before or after work when the polls are open to take paid time off to vote at the start or end of their work days. Creating laws in all states that let people vote before or after work would be more effective than a national holiday, which would quickly be viewed as just another day off to enjoy. Companies including Abercrombie and Fitch Co., Farmers Insurance, Kaiser, Permanent, Patagonia, and Walmart have joined Make Time to Vote campaigns, which encourages employers to provide paid time off, schedule no meetings on Election Day, and give information on mail-in ballots and early voting. Patagonia, an outdoor clothing retailer, paused operations on November 6, 2018, so that all employees could vote. Rose Marcario's CEO stated, "Demonstrating your company's commitment to voting will reinforce how essential it is that every eligible voter shows up, and it will, in turn, help strengthen the idea that businesses can and will come together for a worthy common purpose, protecting our democracy by empowering all American workers to be good citizens." And that's completely true, because employers will also they will provide their employees with paid time off, and they will schedule no sense of meetings and give information on early voting and mail-in ballots to actually help increase voter turnout and allow more and more Americans to actually express their voice, and when they go to the polling station and be handed a ballot to vote for leaders and a party, and even vote on propositions that will actually be put in place as their new laws that will help shape their state's future, that will help and ultimately help shape our country's future for generations to come. So, and the final major pro to this is that making weekdays elections a national holiday is a popular idea that would align the U.S. with other countries. Pew Research Center found that 71% of Democrats and 59% of Republicans support making Election Day a federal holiday. A survey showed that U.S. adults would rather have a federal holiday on Election Day than on Christmas Eve, the Friday after Thanksgiving or St. Patrick's Day. The United States is out of step with the rest of the world. Elections are held on weekends in 27 of the 36 OECD countries. Israel and South Korea make national elections a holiday to avoid economic hardship for voters. The result is voter turnout rates of 72.3% and 77.2% respectively, which is 26 through 32% higher than the United States. A holiday for elections sidesteps the issue of a weekend election, which could conflict with religious obligations. Elections are federal holidays in Singapore, which when combined with mandatory voting, resulted in a voter turnout of 93.6% for the 2015 election of Prime Minister Lee Hsien-loong. I could be pronouncing wrong. Countries such as France, Mexico, and India also observe federal holidays for elections, and this is completely true. And this is what I've been saying all along. That if we want to actually be a leader of democracy, we want to be a leader that we, the people, will elect our leaders that will help shape who we are as a country. Let's actually make Election Day a national holiday, and that's what will show to the rest of the world that America is a strong advocate, a strong leader for democracy, a strong leader for our democratic republic, where we, the people, will elect America's leaders and parties that will determine the future of our country and that will reimagine a new beginning for America for generations to come. And the third major con, and the final major con of why people think Election Day should not be made a national holiday, is that there's other solutions that would more reliably increase voter turnout than a national holiday. And some of the solutions that they argue is automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, early voting, no excuse absentee voting, restoring voting rights to former felons, which I completely agree with, and I'm glad California back in 2020 gave felons that were on parole the right to vote again, and improved civics education and voter outreach. It would all improve voter participation more reliably than a national holiday. Trying one of these alternatives would avoid the negative economic impact of closing businesses for Election Day. Henry Farber, PhD, Hugh Roger Professor of Economics at Princeton University, conducted an analysis of states that made Election Day a holiday for state employees. He concluded that having an election day by itself is not an effective strategy to increase voter turnout. Automatic voter registration, by contrast, could register an additional 22 million and create 7.9 million new voters nationwide within a year. Same-day registration boosts turnout by 5%, and universal implementation of it would have added as many as 4.8 million voters in the 2016 election, according to Daniel Root, JD, and Liz Kennedy, JD, from the Center for American Progress. And this is ultimately true. There are a lot of other ways where we can actually increase voter turnout. If it's automatic voter registration, and even though I still support only allowing U.S. citizens to actually only be automatically registered to vote, where once they go to the DMV and they apply for a driver's license or apply for a state ID, or just like an ordinary state ID, they will be automatically registered to vote in state elections, local elections, and that they meet all the qualification, eligibility, and that they show that they were born in the United States of America. They will be also automatically registered to vote for federal elections as well. And this is ultimately a good thing, because if we want to be an advocate for if we want to be an advocate for the rest of the world in democracy and our free, that we will stand for free and fair elections, let's make Election Day a national holiday. If we want to celebrate our democracy, but let's make Election Day a national holiday where all Americans take a break of their day-to-day lives, and on just one day they all go to the polls with friends and family. With friends and their family and their neighbors and their community members to actually vote for leaders and parties that they feel like will best represent their values, that will create a government that's of, by, and for the people, and also that will ultimately increase voter turnout by enabling more and more and more Americans to vote in our democratic elections. And now, since you now know the pros and cons and my overall opinion why I believe making Election Day a national holiday is vital for us as a federal democratic republic. Let's talk about how I would make Election Day a national holiday. As this presentation says, making Election Day a national holiday. And the first thing I would do, and on this day, all businesses must be closed on that day. All small businesses like stores, restaurants, and superstores will be required to be closed on Election Day. They cannot have any workers work in their retail stores on that specific day. This also includes workers or employees that have federal, state, and local government jobs, except for gas stations, election officials, and polling stations. So there's a need for all Americans to have access to transportation to get to their polling stations to vote. As well, there's enough election officials. There's enough election officials and poll workers to keep the lines down and to collect and count people's ballots. And as well, this is something that I know some people support, even Andrew Yang supports, but I have not been a complete major fan of universal basic income, because I think if you want money, you have to work for it. And this is some way to actually get people to actually vote and actually give them a sense of pride in actually voting and actually doing something to actually shape our future as a country, to shape what path our country will head on. And this ultimately puts in place universal basic income, or in other words, UBI. All Americans that vote on election day in any state, plus the District of Columbia, will receive $1,000 that will be directly deposited to their bank accounts. This applies for presidential, House, and U.S. Senate elections. And this is honestly a good thing, because we're incentivizing them. We're giving them a reward where we're actually rewarding them. We're applauding them for actually voting, for voting for leaders that best represent our values, that best represent their values, and most full-heartedly believe that they are the best candidate to actually be elected as the next president of the United States, or to be re-elected president of the United States, or to actually be their local representative, or to be their United States senator, or to be their state assemblyman, or state senator, or lieutenant governor, or mayor, or governor. When we're incentivizing and rewarding them for actually voting, this will ultimately increase voter turnout by a lot. And it will ultimately increase voter turnout to 100%. And that's ultimately a good thing when every single American votes in our democratic elections. And yet again, voting early, in person, or by mail, this applies to people that work at gas stations, election offices, or who work at polling stations to collect and count the ballots that were received on election day. Poll workers still may vote on election day at their polling place. People who work at gas stations, and reason why I still support people who work at gas stations, so Americans have a sense. So Americans have a lot of so Americans can actually go to gas station and fuel up their automobiles to actually head to so they can get to so they can have a sense of transportation, to get to their polling place and actually vote for a candidate and a political party that will best represent their values in the federal government or state or local governments. As well, election officials also may take time off or miss a couple of hours from work to head to polls and vote for candidates and parties that they believe in. And as well, people who work at a gas station may take time off to vote to go to their local polling place and be handed a ballot to vote for a candidate and party that will best represent their values in the U.S. government. In the U.S. government. And as well, this is yet again going back to expanding upon having more local polling stations, have more of those local polling stations, establish far more local polling places, so more and more Americans have a place to vote that is in walking distance, and it's actually nearby and locally, that's actually in their neighborhoods. And that's ultimately a good thing, because if it's more in your neighborhoods, that will create a sense of community, a sense of belonging to your neighbors, and actually bring all of your neighbors together as they head to the polls and be handed a ballot to actually vote for the candidates and their parties that will best represent their values and that will do a great job at proposing really high quality legislation that will make their lives better, and that will ultimately make our country's lives better. And this is ultimately one of the biggest, and this is how I would make Election Day a national holiday. And this is ultimately, I think, making Election Day a national holiday is a vital step if we want to fix American democracy for generations, and I mean generations to come. Because we will see more and more Americans turning out in our elections for generations to come. It will give us a sense of pride to celebrate of American democracy, what it brought to our history, and what it will bring to us in our future. And we will also be a strong advocate for the rest of the world, that we are an advocate for free and fair elections, and that we are an advocate for democracy and we will always keep promoting and encouraging and being inspirators to other countries to actually, like Cuba, like China, to pursue democracy and allowing their citizens to elect their leaders that will shape their future for their country. So let me hear where you guys stand in the comment section below. Do you like my overall ideas? Do you overall agree with me? Do you think Election Day should be made a national holiday? And do you agree with a lot of my policies of how I would make Election Day a national holiday? Share your opinion in the comment section below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below what you think about my overall opinion of making Election Day a national holiday and how I would do it. But how would you, or in other words, how would you make an Election Day a national holiday? How would you do that? Share your opinion in the comment section below, because we can all be agents of change that will reimagine our democratic elections, that will make it free and fair for all political parties and candidates and for all voters, where we all have the liberty and the freedom to change the course of our nation for the better, where we all can have the liberty to pursue a life that we want to live. So once again, guys, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, this is the Young Centrist, and I am out.